Hi, I'm Kate.
I'm Jacques.
And I'm Chris. We're the three founders of DOTDOT Studio. Before DOTDOT, we worked in massively multiplayer online games, a studio called Drumleaf that was focused on using games to improve the lives of kids. This particular game was an MMORPG in the browser called Star 86, where songs were planets that kids could fly to. And on each planet, the parts of the song are scattered around. So you'd start off by searching the planet and finding the bits of music that you could then perform in real time with other kids. So you could collaboratively make a song with little or no musical experience. And we worked with the University of Auckland on research to ascertain which game mechanics would improve kids' sense of identity to try and lower the risks of anxiety and depression in this age group. So Games for Change is certainly something we have a long history and interest in. But when we started DOTDOT, we wanted to take these technologies and these designs and bring them out into the real world, into the physical space. So what does that look like?
So in the museum space, one example of what this looked like for us was this immersive interactive called Climate Converter, which we created to help visitors feel motivated to take action on climate change. It's a permanent 360 space in a museum where all four walls and the floor are projection mapped and respond to visitor movement. The walls respond in a way that allows visitors to explore the ways that we as a society can reduce harmful CO2 emissions. And then at the plinths, visitors can make a personal pledge to change their own behavior, which then folds up into an origami bird and flies into the environment to join the other pledges.
In the gallery space, we collaborate with artists to create installations that use the latest in XR technologies. We worked with Takashi Murakami to bring to life these illustrations that come to life as the visitors move in the gallery space. The characters are animated using motion capture. Interactivity is made possible with game engine technology, and sensors in the space know how visitors are standing and moving. That means that the dancer, the shamanism player, and the singer all start to perform for you, and as more people gather in front of the artwork, more and more happens in the performance. More recently, we worked with artist Stephanie Dinkins to create a hybrid installation work for the Sundance New Frontier exhibition in 2021. That was the year that Sundance was 100% virtual. And so Secret Garden features the stories of 6 Black women. Interacting with these immersive spaces allows you to encounter the different women's stories. And the interaction is based on the idea of deep listening. So the more you dwell and spend time with a character, the more story you unlock. Online, that means you move through this 3D immersive garden world. You encounter these different characters and you see representations in the space, these little glowing fireflies of other visitors, other people also in there with you. In the physical environment, the space is set up with tracking, so it knows where you're standing, where you're moving through, and based on where you choose to dwell, you hear the different stories come through the speaker systems. These two worlds are connected, so they're built on the same platform, and that means that physical presence in one shows up as physical presence in the other. And so all the kind of the co-presence of the groups in both spaces kind of speaks to the hybridity of the specific work.
In the library space, this is an example of an installation we did for a district council. Specifically, they're looking to engage the community in the design of cycle lanes on the local streets. So they engaged us to make a 3D representation of the road that they're specifically looking to change, which we did initially with photogrammetry, and then create a physical installation where users would drag elements on and off the road to create their own design, and then put on a virtual reality headset to experience that design by pedaling a physical bike. And we also threw in a couple of typical obstacles that you'd see on the street. This street has a horse park, so it's not uncommon for horses to be pulling out of driveways. And at the end of the experience, the users are asked to rate how they thought their design was. And then the design and their rating is sent to the district council to be included in the urban planning process.
We're also deeply interested in how we can create experiences that are site-specific and perhaps sit outside the bounds of a typical gallery or museum space. For this project, Pilgrim, we worked with a BBC journalist, Lauren Hutchinson, to create an interactive location-based audio documentary, specifically for the Bose augmented reality frames. So if you haven't used those frames, the cool thing about them is they sit with the speakers just over the ears, and that means you get pass-through audio. So you have the real world, the sounds of the real world able to hear at the same time as you're getting that augmented layer through the frames. The way this experience works is that it features a series of audio interviews recorded on the Camino de Santiago, which is a pilgrimage that people often do when they have time in their lives to reflect and process something that's happened. So the interviews themselves are quite deep and emotional and affecting. And these stories exist in the app and are told to you through the pilgrims. So you start walking, you'll hear the footsteps and then the voice of a pilgrim telling you their story next to you. And as you walk along, they'll continue to speak to you and tell you their story. If you stop walking, that pilgrim will keep walking on, you'll hear them fade out, and then you'll hear the footsteps and the voice of the next pilgrim. And in this way, you can really curate your own experience of these stories and choose who you do and you don't listen to. At the end of the experience, the visitor is told which pilgrim they spent the most time with on the trail, kind of giving each person that sense that they've had their actual own unique experience of the walk. And no two experiences of the walk would be the same.
During the pandemic, we also started to explore the virtual online space and imagined and built immersive spaces for virtual exchange and collaboration. This art gallery is one example that we created for Nesta and is like a physical space but online where you can explore and see a showcase of projects and research looking at using XR in the future of live performance, including Dream by the Royal Shakespeare Company.
So as you can see, our definition of XR in the GLAM sector is relatively broad, and included in that definition is this installation we did for the Museum of Dog. The screen you see we consider as a portal into a virtual environment with a virtual dog, and the visitor to the museum is challenged to learn how to train this virtual dog. The installation itself is responsive to voice and gesture. So as the visitor gets instructions on how to make a dog sit, they're able to do that with their voice, with their gesture. But for the sake of the presentation, we're going to focus on one area of XR for GLAM that has been a focus of ours since we started the studio, and that's virtual reality in the museum sector, which we began working on in 2016 with Te Papa, the National Museum of New Zealand, and their Mahuki program. We are particularly interested in XR for GLAM because we see it as being of real assistance to museums, libraries, and galleries as they're combating content fatigue. So everybody now has access to all the content in the world on their cell phone. That makes the barrier for going to a museum, going to a library, that much higher. And so they're needing to compete in a sense, as awful as that sounds. They need to offer something which people can't get at home. And we see virtual reality, and more specifically out-of-home virtual reality, which can be multiplayer, can involve physical props, can allow for 6 degrees of freedom. We see that as being kind of a win-win for all, because it is so good at education. It's so good at creating empathy with the subject matter. And museums, libraries, and galleries already have the goal of improving society and being open as possible to all of the public. So it's really an area of passion for us. And in 2016, what did that look like? We were particularly interested in telling stories where there were physical props. So this one is a cave in France where you can hold a torch to see the ancient cave paintings and hear some of the stories about those paintings. And the second one there, a door that you could walk through to step onto the surface of Mars. You turn around and you walk in the other direction, and you're in the middle of space, and planets are the size of basketballs. And with your fingers, you can throw an asteroid into the solar system and see how it responds to the gravity of those different celestial bodies. So, humble beginnings.
Then, following on from those explorations, between 2017 and 2020, we were part of the New Museum's Arts and Cultural Incubator here in New York City, where we were carrying out our research into XR technologies in the GLAM sector as part of New Inc.'s museum track, funded by the Knight Foundation. So this really had us talking, observing, asking questions of different institutions to better understand the challenges facing the GLAM sector when it comes to integrating these kinds of XR experiences for their visitors. That meant in 2019, we spent some time at the Tech Interactive in San Jose. And when we first started talking to the tech, we kind of thought this would be a good example of an institution who have worked this format out. They had a sponsorship from Oculus at the time, Vive as well, and have been running a gallery space there to showcase virtual reality to their visitors.
However, when we arrived, we discovered that they were closing down their Reboot Reality exhibition, and there was really three key reasons for this. The first was that it was facilitating the experiences was expensive in terms of hosting hours and required a one-to-one ratio of docent to visitor. Secondly, the available content was hard to learn due to complex gaming controllers. So often visitors spent more time learning the controls than actually getting to experience the VR experience itself. And thirdly, single-player experiences were very isolating for visitors and would break them out of the social experience of going to the museum with their friends and family.
Interestingly, there was one virtual reality experience that the tech did keep going, and that's this one, Birdly. And the reason they could keep that going was because they were charging a ticket price for that. And I think initially that was also to help with throughput, because everybody that went to the museum would want to jump on Birdly. But it meant that they could afford a docent, a full-time docent that could man this particular station. So we took all those challenges and started researching towards a model that fit this and all museums. So over 75% of visitors come with one or three, up to three other people. So content that was social, where you could see the other users, content where you didn't really need to learn how to use a game controller or a device that was not immediately obvious, that you weren't familiar with in the real world. We also realized through this research that the solution really needs to be turnkey. Museums do have technical staff, but that technical staff will be very proficient in the technologies currently in the museum, but unlikely to be proficient at the technologies required to maintain XR installations. And that means maintenance is also very important. No museum wants to take on a permanent or long-lasting installation that they're not able to maintain. Scalability is very important for throughput. So a solution needs to be able to enable dozens of people to experience it in a short period of time. And being able to switch out the content is also critical for maintaining the installation for a long period of time.
Since late 2019, we've been taking these kind of learnings and design principles into a project that we're doing as designers in residence at the New York Hall of Science. So it's a co-located multiplayer virtual reality experience that asks visitors to work together to make the city more resilient when it comes to climate change, and specifically in New York City sea level rise. Using collaborative gameplay mechanics, storytelling and embodied learning, we're really looking for this project to drive conversations about how the city can be better preparing for the future and empower residents to understand the levers at play. Visitors show up in the world as these Godzilla-sized characters and can place interventions based on how the fictional weather reporter is reporting on what's happening to the city.
It was during this project that the pandemic started to cause many places to shut down, and so we very quickly had to explore some alternative ways of developing the project online. So we quickly added some online servers to the project and added the ability to run the project in a kind of a virtual simulation, so people without VR headsets could also experience it while we were collaborating at home. And this led us to continue to playtest and prototype remotely. And also during this time, we began to brainstorm how a post-COVID world might be different, in particular when you're asking people to put things on your face. And one area which would be of particular note here is the hygiene area. So obviously people are going to be more aware of things which they are putting in contact with their face. And so having a solution that allows you to keep things clean and for people to be aware and feel comfortable that.
While the pandemic threw up these challenges, the technology changes in the space continue and provide a lot of opportunities. So we're currently in production with this piece, which is a multiplayer cinematic virtual reality experience for a museum. It's a retelling of a historic event. And for this, we've created the world in high fidelity with incredibly realistic environments and utilizing Unreal's new metahumans to power the characters in the story. And this experience really talks to what we believe virtual reality is good for. So immersive experiences that are otherwise too dangerous, too difficult, or just simply impossible to experience in real life. In the case of this, you can't go back in time and see this historic event. And so we've used archival photos and documentation to recreate these worlds. And after the experience, the visitor is going to step out from this experience into the world, the actual physical space that it took place in. We've been working closely with the museum to make sure that the way that this is designed can feature as a permanent installation, so it can allow for the throughput they need to sell the tickets, and also be scalable so that they can start with 6 to 10 people at a time, and then continue to add scale to the experience to be able to factor in how they show it to different visitor groups like schools or families or tour groups.
So, coming out of COVID, things are starting to accelerate again. We're really excited about that. Brands are helping push the needle forward. There's lots of people from different backgrounds coming together, and locations, venues are looking for experiences. So, thank you very much, everybody, for your time. We welcome all questions. Please get in touch via our website.
Thank you.